It was the 1st of October, and I could feel that refreshing autumn breeze signaling the start of my favorite season. My boyfriend Chris and I had just moved into our new home, and I wanted to surprise him by decorating the house with fall and Halloween decorations before he got home from work. I thought it would be a fun and festive idea. I picked up some items from Marshall's and other stores, and I also searched online, especially on Facebook Marketplace. While browsing, I found a listing for a large green container filled with fall decorations, priced at just $20. It seemed like a great deal. The seller, named Cody, also mentioned that he was clearing out his house and had other items for sale. His profile was private, and his picture was of a hat covering most of his face. His other listings were random, including a phone, women's clothes, and Christmas decorations. I messaged Cody, and he responded right away. He confirmed that the container had all sorts of fall-themed decorations, and he agreed to let me pick them up later in the evening around 9 p.m. He sent me his address, and after checking it on Google Maps, the house seemed normal enough, though it was in a somewhat sketchy area. I decided to bring my friend Sally along, just to be safe. I picked up Sally, and we made the half-hour drive to Cody's place. As we got closer, Sally started joking about how sketchy the area felt, even though we could barely see much in the dark besides the occasional streetlight or storefront. When we were almost there, I got a message from Cody saying, "When you get here, you can come right in." Both Sally and I felt uncomfortable with that, so we agreed we'd knock on the door instead. When we arrived, there were no cars in the driveway, but some dim lights were on inside the house. I messaged Cody, letting him know we were there, and moments later, Sally and I noticed the blinds move, as if someone was peeking out at us. Then Cody messaged again, saying he was at the door and we could come in. Feeling uneasy, we cautiously approached the house. I called out Cody's name but got no response. Sally whispered that we should leave, and as we were about to walk back to the car, a man suddenly appeared at the door, half hidden, and gestured for us to come in. Despite our apprehension, we slowly approached the door, which was now fully open, and entered the house. The smell that hit us was strange, like an old musty scent mixed with something far worse. We heard heavy footsteps, and then Cody called out from another room, saying the decorations were there. His voice was unnervingly deep. We stayed close to each other as we cautiously moved to the next room, which was dimly lit and filled with old furniture. The smell in this room was absolutely vile, like something rotting. In the middle of the room was a red container, not the green one from the Facebook ad. Cody stood by it, and he invited us to come and open it. Feeling even more uneasy, I asked him to open it instead. His response, "Well, you're no fun," made both Sally and I inch toward the door. When Cody lifted the lid, an even stronger, more revolting smell hit us. Without hesitation, Sally and I bolted for the front door and didn't look back until we reached the car. As I started the engine, I noticed the front door had already been closed. We sped off, not knowing if Cody was watching us again from the window. We never found out what was in that container, but we were sure it wasn't decorations. When I told Chris about the experience, he asked for the address but promised not to go. He just wanted to check it out online. The next day, he came home later than usual and admitted that he had visited the house. An older woman had answered the door, claiming she lived there alone. Chris believed me though, since I had shown him all the Facebook messages, including the address. When he looked up the property records, it listed the owner as a woman in her late 60s. The whole experience was incredibly creepy, and from now on, I avoid buying things directly from people's houses. My friend Caleb and I have always had a habit of doing reckless things together. We've known each other since we were 10, and by the time we turned 21, we became roommates. We lived in Brunswick, Georgia, a coastal town that had its ups and downs but was generally a decent place to grow up. However, by the time we reached our 20s, it had started feeling a bit dull. One creepy house in the area stood out from the rest. It looked like it belonged to a different era and had been abandoned for as long as we could remember. Since it was mid-October and everyone was getting into the Halloween spirit, we thought it would be fun to explore this house one Friday night. So, after work, we grabbed baseball bats for protection, picked up fast food and beers, and drove over. To avoid suspicion, we parked a little down the road. The properties around there were large, with houses far apart, making it less likely for anyone to notice us snooping around. With our backpacks packed with beers and baseball bats discreetly stuffed inside, we started our adventure. As we quietly walked toward the house, whispering to each other, it became clear how dark the area was. There were no streetlights, and the house we were approaching had no lights either. The neighboring house was equally dark. With no other source of light, we turned on our flashlights and made our way around to the backyard to avoid being seen. Surprisingly, the back door was unlocked and the windows were intact, though we knew the house had been abandoned for a long time. It felt strange that everything looked untouched. We entered the house, navigating the cramped interior with our flashlights. Despite the house's size, the rooms were small and maze-like, making it feel a bit claustrophobic. As Caleb wandered off into another room, I found myself alone, and soon after, he called out, "Yo, there's still furniture in here." I responded, noting how it seemed like the place had been abandoned in a hurry. The furniture looked ancient, like something you'd find in an old family home that hadn't been touched in years. I kept exploring the first floor, stumbling upon a narrow hallway lined with doors leading to what appeared to be bedrooms. I entered one of them, but it was cramped, with the bed occupying most of the space. Rummaging through the drawers and the closet, I found nothing but junk. Soon after, Caleb told me he was heading upstairs. I checked out another small bedroom before moving on to the last two doors in the hallway. One led to a bathroom, while the other opened to a staircase descending into the basement. Despite every instinct telling me to avoid it, I decided to go down. Halfway down the creaky stairs, I noticed a faint glow. I turned off my flashlight, realizing that there was still a dim light coming from the basement. At that moment, I should have left, but curiosity got the better of me, and I continued my descent. At the bottom of the stairs, I saw what was lighting the room: two tall candles sitting on a table. But what really caught my attention was the rocking chair next to the table. It was rocking, and someone was sitting in it, facing away from the stairs. All I could see was a hand resting on the arm of the chair. Fear took over, and I started backing up the stairs as quietly as possible, cringing with every creak and squeak. I was almost to the top when one of the stairs made a particularly loud sound, and I froze, praying the person in the basement hadn't heard. When I looked back down, the basement was now pitch black. The candles had been blown out. Terrified, I closed the door and quietly made my way through the house to the stairs leading to the second floor, where Caleb was. Standing at the bottom of the staircase, I called out to Caleb, but he didn't answer. I repeated his name, growing increasingly nervous as I climbed the stairs. When I reached the top, still calling his name, he finally stepped out from a dark room and asked if I was serious. I told him I wasn't joking. There was someone in the basement, and we needed to leave immediately. He followed me down the stairs, and we made our way back toward the back door. As we passed the hallway leading to the basement door, we saw the silhouette of a man standing in front of it. Without hesitation, we ran for the exit, sprinting to my car and speeding away as quickly as possible. On the drive home, I explained everything to Caleb, who was in complete disbelief, repeatedly saying, "Yo, what the fuck?" While I don't think anyone legally lived in that house, it was clear that someone was squatting there, hiding out in the basement. Whoever they were, I never wanted to find out. After that night, I never went anywhere near that house or street again. This incident took place in 2019, a year that stands out to me because it was when I was living independently in Asheville, North Carolina. I had moved there for a temporary job and saw it as an opportunity to live on my own for the first time. At 22 years old, fresh out of college, I was excited to have my own apartment downtown. Most of the things I needed were within walking distance, but I also had a car for trips out of town. One of my favorite things about Asheville was the abundance of hiking trails. While I had explored many of the local trails, I hadn't yet visited DuPont State Forest, so one day I decided to go. It was a random Wednesday in October, and with the leaves changing color, it felt like the perfect time for a hike. I knew the park would be quiet since it was a weekday, and most people would be at work. The drive to DuPont State Forest was just under an hour from Asheville. When I arrived at the park's parking area, I found the beginning of the trail and started my hike. The trail was peaceful, and it seemed like I was the only one out there. The cloudy sky and recent rainfall added to the atmosphere, and I knew the waterfalls, triple falls and high falls, would be even more spectacular after days of rain. After walking about 0.4 miles, I reached the Triple Falls, which looked amazing. Fun fact, a scene from the Hunger Games was filmed there. As I sat on a rock to take in the view, I noticed a woman standing on the trail watching me. I waved to her out of politeness, but she simply turned and walked deeper into the woods, disappearing from sight. I didn't think much of it and continued my hike, figuring I had just started and wasn't tired yet. I ascended the trail further and eventually reached High Falls, where I stopped again to take photos and videos. As I sat on another rock, I had a strange sense of déjà vu when I saw the same woman again, standing in the woods staring at me. This time I didn't wave. I looked down at my phone, trying to ignore her, but after a few seconds, I glanced up to find she had vanished. From what I could see from a distance, she appeared to be in her mid-50s, with short, grayish blonde hair. I didn't dwell on it, but I made a mental note to avoid the direction I last saw her go. I kept hiking, eventually reaching the covered bridge, another landmark on the trail. I stopped to take more photos and videos, drank some water, and when I glanced back at the side of the bridge I had just walked from, there she was again. The same woman was staring at me, and I hadn't seen or heard her approach. Feeling annoyed, I walked toward her, saying, "Excuse me," but she turned and walked away quickly. Her speed was unsettling for someone her age, and I briefly wondered if she was someone who needed help, but I didn't chase after her. I stood at the bridge for a few minutes before deciding to turn back, figuring it was time to head down the trail. It would take me another 45 minutes to get back to my car. As I descended the trail, I passed a younger woman walking her dog. I stopped her and asked if she had seen an older woman pass by, but she said no. Trying to make conversation, I told her about how I kept seeing this woman staring at me, which she found strange and laughed about. After we shared a brief laugh, I continued on my way. The rest of my hike was uneventful. I passed one other person who gave me a friendly smile and nod, and I made it back to my car without further incident. That evening, I went on a date with a girl I had been seeing. We went to our favorite bar, had some pumpkin spice beers, and watched baseball. I told her about the strange woman on the trail, and she found it amusing, though it did sound a bit eerie. Afterward, I went home thinking nothing more of it. Later that night, something unusual happened. I'm typically a deep sleeper and rarely wake up in the middle of the night, so when I did wake up in the dark, it was already odd. As I was becoming more alert, I heard something at the foot of my bed. Looking up, I saw the figure of a woman standing there. It felt like the blood drained from my body, and I started screaming loudly, probably loud enough for my neighbors to hear. I scrambled to the headboard, trying to distance myself from the figure, and then, without a word, the woman turned and walked out of my room. I stopped screaming and tried to catch my breath. I flicked on my bedside lamp and shouted, "Who's there?" but was met with silence. I grabbed a knife from my nightstand and checked every room and closet in the apartment, turning on every light as I went. I found nothing, and no one was there. Panicked, I called my dad. I explained what had happened, and he assured me that I had likely hallucinated the figure while I was half asleep. He said I was probably still waking up and my brain had conjured an image from earlier that day. Though I knew he was probably right, the image I had seen felt so real, and the resemblance between the woman at the foot of my bed and the woman on the trail was unsettling. Somehow, I managed to fall asleep again that night after barricading my bedroom door with my dresser. 2 days later, I received news that my aunt in Germany had passed away. I had never met her, as she had been estranged from my mom for over 25 years. My mom and uncle flew to Germany for the funeral. When they returned, I saw a photo of my aunt on the prayer card, and I felt the same chilling sensation I had felt when I saw the figure at the foot of my bed. My aunt looked exactly like the woman I had seen on the trail and in my room. This whole experience shook me to my core, especially because I had told my dad about it before we even knew my aunt had passed. I grew up Catholic but never considered myself deeply religious, yet this incident made me question everything I believed in. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed our stories and would like to hear more, please consider subscribing to our channel. Your support helps us continue bringing you captivating tales and new content every week. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. We appreciate every one of you for being a part of our storytelling journey.